see women working in the sciences and in technology. And today we have a special speaker who is going to show some of her work and talk to us about how she found a way to work with the technology we have today and get results that we weren't quite expecting. They really are wonderful. I would like to introduce first of all, however, Steve Romani. He is the Dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Science. They are the people who sponsored the program for today. Steve, would you like to come up?
Thank you, Liz. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to this event. I'm delighted to be introducing today's speaker, Ms. Jessica Lauretti. Jessica is not only an artist, she's an entrepreneur, an author, and she's based in New York City, so we're delighted to have her here with us today. As you will notice from her presentation, she has a diverse background at the intersection of art, politics, and culture, and has expertise in immersive tech, social impact, and new media. That's why we have our colleague from School of Communication here also. At Hofstra, we are trying to create synergy between computer science and School of Communication. As you know, virtual reality and augmented reality is becoming a big thing. Their students are trained in storytelling, and our students are trained in technology. So I think together we can create wonderful opportunities, as Ashish has already have done for our students at Hofstra. Jessica has won several awards, and I'm not going to go through them. Her professional career spans the startup media and tech world, from a global executive role at immersive tech startup RYOT to a development role at social impact startup Purpose and a production role at a new media disruptor called Vice. She's currently working on a book about women and leadership. That's what really makes her the ideal speaker for this occasion. And she aims to tell stories to modern audiences that reflect on the human experience. And I just want to add here, one of the things we are doing at Hofstra Engineering and Computer Science this year is that we started a new program called WSpice. And the purpose of the program is that to create opportunity specifically for young women, the freshmen who start their majors in computer science or engineering. The students in the room, you will be hearing about it if you haven't heard about it yet. In January, we are planning to have a program that on the week of January 13, you will be going with a faculty mentor to a number of local companies to learn about opportunities for women in engineering and computer science. And during the summer, we have a competitive program that we're going to admit 12 young freshman students, female students into it, and we're going to immerse them for 5 weeks on a full-time basis in different areas, from bioengineering to electrical engineering, from entrepreneurship to industrial engineering. And hopefully by the end of the 5 weeks, these young women who are going to go through our program would have a good understanding of opportunities which exist for them in future. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you guys all for coming today. As I said, my name is Jessica Lauretti. I am currently the founder and principal at a company that I started called LAURELS. And it's a consulting practice that works with media and tech companies on emerging trends and disruption in the media and tech space. So one thing I just wanted to say from the beginning, I'm going to be talking about my experience in my previous role where I was the global head of Riot Studio, which is a part of Verizon Media. I'm no longer there, so I'm not here as their representative. I'm not here to speak on their behalf, but I will be sharing work that we did together. So I just wanted to give the proper attribution and credit to Riot and to all the work that they've done throughout their existence. So I'm going to start with a little backstory, and really I'm just going to tell you my story and the story of how I started working in tech, and then we'll have some time for some conversation at the end. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. So Riot began back in 2012 as a startup media company. It was founded by two guys, Bryn Muser and David Darg. They were filmmakers who were working on the ground in Haiti as a part of the Peace Corps. And they were really interested in mostly documentary filmmaking, and social justice is kind of the space that they were working in. And they had this idea for a startup that was like a tech media hybrid. And their idea was, let's connect people
to issues that they care about when they're happening in the moment. So there's a hurricane, there's some kind of natural disaster. Let's give them an opportunity to donate funds, to volunteer, to donate other goods or services right in that moment as they're reading that news story, so people don't have this overwhelming feeling like there's so many horrible things happening in the world, like the world is a disaster, there's nothing we can do about it, feeling very helpless. It was kind of this technology idea to help solve for that problem. Over the years, they evolved and kind of threw out of a documentary filmmaking practice, really got interested in kind of on the ground floor of virtual reality and 360-degree video. And they started doing a lot of experimentation in the space and really, thinking about how could they take what they knew about DIY filmmaking, on the ground, kind of scrappy documentary filmmaking production techniques, and apply it to virtual reality and to this new format. So that's a little backstory about them. A little backstory about me. So I grew up in the suburbs of Connecticut. I moved to New York City in 1999 to go to art school. I went to the School of Visual Arts and I studied filmmaking. I majored in cinematography. I initially thought I wanted to be a cinematographer and a DP, and kind of through the course of film school realized that was not really interesting to me. Kind of at the same time, I got very interested in politics and activism, and I got really drawn into documentary filmmaking and also just to kind of more abstract video installation, art, film, that kind of abstract film world. So I spent my college and post-college years really working in that space. This is me with my Super 8 camera. I used to kind of travel around and make these self-portraits on Super 8 that I would shoot on film and edit and make these kind of more abstract portraitures along with several documentary films. Late in my 20s, I started a band because I got really kind of bored with filmmaking. I felt like kind of the way that we are right now, that it was this very one-sided experience where an audience sits in a room and it's dark and it's quiet and you're alone and you're just looking at a screen, kind of consuming a story and consuming content. And I really wanted something that was more community driven, and I was really connected to art mediums that really brought people together. My brother was always a musician, and kind of on a whim one night we were like, let's start a band together. We ended up starting a record label, releasing 3 albums, touring the world, and doing lots of other things. So I spent a significant amount of time doing that, and at some point in my career I came home one time from a tour and, to be completely frank, was really broke. And I didn't have enough money to pay my rent, and I had sublet my room, and I was like, oh my God, how am I gonna do anything? And I was asked one of my friends, I need a job, any job, I don't care what it is, I'll do anything. And he was working at Vice Media at the time. And this was back in 2010, so Vice was still a very small company. They were mostly known as a skateboarding magazine and kind of like a home for punk counterculture. And they were about to start a music channel. And I went in for an interview and got a freelance job as a video editor on their soon-to-be launched music channel called Noisy. So I thought I was going to work there for a couple weeks. And I ended up working there for 2.5 years and was really started to work on their music channel, their arts and culture channel called Creators Project. I went on to work on some of the early Vice News documentary projects as well. And kind of at a certain point just felt like I had done everything I could do there and decided to quit. So if you've ever quit a job before, it's like the most fun thing you could ever do in your entire life for the first half an hour. And then it's like the most terrifying thing you've ever done immediately afterwards, because you're like, wait, what have I done? I actually need to get a job again. So I started calling a ton of my friends and saying, hey, I'm freelance again. If anybody has any work, please keep me in mind. And a friend of mine had started working at this new social impact creative agency called Purpose. And I had never heard of them. I didn't know anything about them or what they did. And she said, hey, do you want to produce this video tomorrow? And I said, yes. And I was like, I have no idea what it is or what it's for or like how much they're going to pay me, but I'll totally do it. I'll be there at 10 a.m. So I started working at Purpose and doing freelance projects, and they were really focused in a really different space than I had come from. They were really like a management consulting firm, which if you're not familiar with what that is, that's a company that helps companies run better as companies. It's kind of confusing and like sort of wonky, but they were starting to do all this creative work, and they were working with nonprofits as well as foundations, and I worked on several projects there. Most notably, we worked on the launch of Mayor Bloomberg's gun violence prevention nonprofit called Every Town for Gun Safety. So I had the honor and the privilege to work on all the creative content for the launch of that organization. I worked on projects for the United Nations, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and all of these big institutions working on some of the most important issues of our time. Kind of similarly, I worked there for about 3 years, and then I was kind of, feeling like I was up for a new challenge, and I got a phone call from Bryn Mooser, who is the CEO and co-founder of Riot. And I had met him through the work that I had done at Purpose, but we had never worked together. And he called me and he said, Jessica, my company just got acquired. The Huffington Post just acquired us, and now we're a part of them, and we are supposed to be the 360 virtual reality news arm for the Huffington Post internationally. And he said, I need your help in New York because I'm based in LA. Could you please come in and help us build this team? And he was like, there's one thing. You're going to have to become a virtual reality expert overnight. And I was like, got it. No problem. Sign me up. I can handle that. And he was like, and furthermore, not only do you need to do that, but you're going to have to start traveling around the world and speaking to people everywhere about the future of media and the future of storytelling. And I was like, okay, this is great. I'd be happy to do this. So my first day on the job, we start. And I assume when you have your first day on a job, oftentimes you think you're going to meet a lot of people, you're going to go to a lot of coffees, it's going to be kind of chill, you're going to kind of like see what's happening and kind of figure out what the whole thing is. And the first day of my job was the day of the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting, which was a horrific tragedy in our nation's history. And so I walked into the Huffington Post newsroom for the first time in the middle of a breaking news environment. So suddenly there were several issues in front of me, and I indeed had to become a virtual reality expert overnight. So the first question was, how do we cover this issue? When you're working in a newsroom, there are hundreds of different editorial verticals. So there's a video team, there's different formats, there's writing teams, there's video teams. Even within the video team, there's like the live stream team and the Facebook team and the longer form video team. And then there's all these different people who are covering the subject matter from a different perspective. So there's the politics team, there's the identities team, there's the national news desk team, and everybody is covering the same event but needs a different angle. So we walk in and we're like, okay, great, we're the virtual reality 360 news team. What are we gonna do? So the first thing that we thought was, I told the woman, Joy, who was the producer, I was like, get in a cab and go to the airport and just get on the next plane to Orlando. And by the time you get to Florida, we'll tell you what you're doing, where you're staying, like we'll get you a hotel, we'll get you a car, whatever it is that you need, just grab your things and go. So she just left immediately out the door. So then we have about, the flight's like maybe 2 hours to Orlando from New York. So we have about that much time to figure out what are we going to tell her? What's the brief? What is she going to do when she gets there? So we start to think about, okay, how can we cover this? So the first thing we thought about was, why don't we have her shoot the candlelight vigil? It's going to be a big space. There'll be lots of people there. And then we kind of realized really quickly, like, that's not a really good use of virtual reality and 360 video. One, it's really dark. It's going to be kind of hard to see. And also, there's not that much happening. It's kind of just like a bunch of people standing around. So while maybe like emotionally or sentimentally, it's an interesting angle, visually, it's not that interesting. And with something like this, you have to be the first one to get it up. So like if we were not going to be the first people to get this piece of content live, it kind of like didn't matter, like if we did it at all. And at the time, it was too hard for us to beat, you know, like a CNN or like an MSNBC or somebody like that has massive teams and massive crews live streaming all of this kind of content in a 24-hour breaking news cycle. So the next idea we had was, well, there's going to be a protest and a similar kind of experience in New York City. So why don't we go there and we can like interview some people, and there's going to be like some music and some protests and some activists and things, and maybe that would be a good idea. And then we were kind of like, I don't know, it kind of has the same problems. A protest is also kind of just like a bunch of people standing around in the street. It's not super interesting. I'm not sure if it's a really good use of this format or a really good use of our time. And so we decided to scrap that concept as well. So we're at about noon, I guess, in the middle of the afternoon. And we're like, okay, the news director came to us and was like, you guys got to come up with something better because you're not doing good enough, fast enough. So come up with something else. Go back to the drawing board. So we went back to the drawing board and we're just trying to come up with some ideas. And we had kind of a breakthrough moment. We had an insight. We just were like, okay, let's just stop for a second and think about this story. In this story, if you recall, there was 49 people who were killed in a nightclub shooting from a mass shooting. And there was something about that number that we just kind of kept coming back to. It was very striking. It's just like, that's so many people, like 49 people, so many, it's a lot. And so we had this idea. What if we tried to visualize what 49 people looked like? So what we ended up doing was we had our team in LA go to the West Hollywood candlelight vigil, and we grabbed 49 people and put them in a circle around the 360 virtual reality camera. We had someone speaking directly to the camera who said, today we're here to pay our respects to this horrible tragedy that happened. Take a second to look around and really think about what 49 people means. And so all of a sudden, then you as the viewer at home are looking around in this virtual reality 360 environment, and you look at the faces of 49 people, and you see them, and you look at them, and you start to think like, wow, every single one of those person, they have a mom, a dad, you know, hopes and dreams, all of the things that make up a life. And so what happened was, what we created was the feeling for the viewer, the feeling for the audience of what it feels like to be at a candlelight vigil, to really think and like be retrospective about that moment and reflective about that moment, but without actually being there and without being so on the nose where we just showed you what the candlelight visual looked like, but instead made you feel like what it felt to be there. So it was a hugely successful piece. We were very proud of it. It was very touching and kind of still can give you goosebumps to this day. Also, you know, the expectation in a newsroom like that is for your piece of content to go viral. And we had over 1 million views in 24 hours, which at the time was completely unheard of for this kind of content. So it was, by many different measures, an incredible success. So that's the story of my first day in the job. I'm going to share with you now some of the things that I've learned kind of through the course of that experience and then my subsequent experience working in VR. And so this really comes out of the tradition of what I would call virtual reality for good. So virtual reality, or 360 video, as it's sometimes referred to, has a couple different areas of which it's emerged. So obviously the entertainment industry, obviously the gaming industry, but then also the nonprofit documentary filmmaking community has also really embraced this new technology and has been using it and has been kind of at the forefront of its development as well. And there's a few reasons for why this is. So you may have heard this phrase before, the empathy machine. So this is something that was sort of coined, is that virtual reality has something that they call presence. It has this ability to transport you to another place, to another world, to help you stand in somebody else's shoes, to see someone else's perspective, to really see what it's like to live in a different place or a different environment. And what we found time and time again is that this really is true. Both anecdotally, we've seen quotes like this that I saw people take their headsets off with tears in their eyes. And I can tell you I've given probably no less than 1 million virtual reality demos to folks, young folks, older folks, many different backgrounds in lots of different kinds of communities. And people really, especially if it's their first time experiencing, are really blown away and are really touched in a very, very deeply emotional way by this technology. And I can say too, I was a skeptic. I was an absolute critic and skeptic of this going into this experience. I thought that a lot of the people who were using VR was like, it was just for press, but it didn't really have any kind of ubiquity or mainstream accessibility. And so I sort of was like, oh, I don't really know about this. But I think really after these experiences, I was really won over by the potential of what it really is capable of doing. We've also seen incredible data. This is a case study, again, from Riot and their work. So they did a film for Pencils of Promise, which is a nonprofit that does work in Africa around education. And they made a short film for a gala event, and they raised almost $2 million in 24 hours just from the film, because people saw this film, saw this different perspective, and were just so emotionally driven to act. It really drives people to do something. And United Nations as well has seen incredible success. I don't know the numbers specifically offhand, but they started doing, how when you're walking down the street and people stop you and say like, oh, do you care about animal rights or human rights or things like that? They would be showing 360 and virtual reality films to people on the street, and they like quadrupled their donations because people were so driven to act and so driven to just take out their checks and do anything that they could to help once they saw something from a really different perspective. So I call this talk Forget Everything You Know, and that's for a couple of reasons. I'm going to go through now just some of the examples, kind of like some of the tips, the things that I've really learned that I think are important to think about when you're creating this content. So one is that you really have to forget what you know about filmmaking. So virtual reality in particular comes from this background of filmmaking and this practice of filmmaking and storytelling, but really it has nothing to do with the kind of classic cinema structure or the classic way that you would approach creative development for cinema or even abstract video art or anything that kind of falls within the filmmaking tradition. I would say that I think it's a lot closer to user experience design, as well as maybe immersive theater, which are two creative practices that are really thinking about the audience's experience. When you're a filmmaker, you're not, in some ways, obviously, you're trying to communicate something to an audience, but you're not really thinking about what is the experience of the user, of the audience member, while they're participating or consuming this piece of content. You're more thinking about how are they going to feel, or how they're going to think, or what is the message that they'll walk away with. And this is a really, really different thing. And there's a couple reasons why this is. So the first is just because of cinematography. So in the filmmaking tradition, we have the practice of cinematography and the art of cinematography, where we have a variety of lenses, right? You have a wide shot, you have a medium shot, you have a close-up, you have all of these different tools to help tell your story, to create drama, to create tension, to point out specific little things, to highlight things here and there. And with 360 video, you have one, and it's just everything. It's just everything that's all around the camera. So it's a really different way of thinking in that regard. And a lot of people think there are sort of two sides of the coin. Some people think that this is unethical because now all of a sudden everything is in the view. And the flip side of that argument is that it's actually more democratized, because instead of a camera person putting their own perspective on what the vantage point or the viewpoint is, we're actually showing you everything. And you kind of get to decide what you look at and what you see. One of the main issues that we had working with clients in this space is that you would show them a 360 video and they would say like, oh, well, like, but where's the close-up? And it's like, well, there isn't a close-up. There's really only a close-up if your subject matter moves close to the camera. The camera doesn't move close to the subject in the way that traditional filmmaking does. So the other side, the other main tool of filmmaking is editing. And so if you see in a traditional, even a 30-second, commercial ad that you see, or a 5-minute Facebook video that you watch, would literally have hundreds of thousands of edits. So there would be several different layers of footage and graphics and colors and text and all of these different elements. And then there's also pacing. So things move fast, things move slow. The juxtaposition of different images creates different ideas in our minds. There's lots of different theories around how editing works. But we don't have any of these tools in 360 or virtual reality as well. It's really kind of like what you see is what you get. And so it's a really, really different way of thinking about it, because it's a lot slower and it's a lot more stripped down. So you don't have a lot of the things that you would normally rely on to kind of jazz things up or make things more exciting or keep a video moving. You don't have any of those tools. So you really have to figure out ways for the content that you are filming to be interesting, to create engagement with the user in a really, really kind of different way. So the second tip I would say is that this is really participatory content. And so another kind of reason why this is really hard for filmmakers in particular is because, directors or auteurs are sort of used to it being about them. And this is not about the creator. This is about the consumer of this content. And so whenever you're making something in this space, you really have to be thinking about, how is somebody going to be viewing this? How do I know where they're going to be looking? You don't necessarily. What if I want someone to look over there? Or what if I want someone to look over there? How am I going to direct them to do that? Do I just let them do whatever they want? Maybe they're going to be looking back here while we want them to look over here. So you have to find ways to either direct your audience to do that, or you have to kind of let go of control. And I think we're seeing this a lot in media and a lot of different other kinds of formats. This kind of change in the way that information moves. So I often think about the way that news and information is spread today. So I'll tell a quick story. I think it was 2 years ago. I was working in the East Village in Manhattan, and there was a shooting in Tribeca. So Tribeca is 1 mile away from the East Village, right? It's very local. It's like 2 neighborhoods over. The way that I heard about that shooting was from my mom in Connecticut, who texted me. So I was literally local to an event that happened, but information gets broadcast globally, and then people are consuming that and then reconnecting it in personal, closed circuit ways. And if you really start to think about that and how people communicate and how they get access to information and how they share information, it's really revelatory to how we can begin to open our minds to tell stories in completely different ways. At the same time, we're seeing the major shift in media from a centralized to a decentralized pattern, right? So we used to have a couple mainstream media outlets that kind of controlled all the information, and we're sending this out, and now we're seeing hundreds, if not thousands, of content creators, of different perspectives online, of every side of any kind of argument, people sharing what they think. And this is really important too, to think about how we're creating these experiences, how people are viewing them, where they're seeing them, and how do we use this new way of thinking and really incorporate it into the format, into the conceptual thinking of the content and the stories that we're creating. Finally, I think that this is an undefined format. So we don't really know what's gonna happen. And every single person who makes a virtual reality film is a pioneer in their time. And it's really important that we have lots of different people participating, that we have lots of different people to be a part of this conversation, and to really challenge ourselves to think about this in a completely new and different way. And so a lot of people, I often would say, I think that this is in some ways like harkens back to the time of the Lumiere brothers. So the Lumiere brothers were some of the first inventors of cinema. And there's a very famous story about how when they first showed a film of a train pulling into a station, the audiences ran out of the theater because they thought that the train was actually there. They didn't understand that what they were looking at was a three-dimensional field being portrayed on a flat projection screen. And so we're at kind of a similar moment with virtual reality, augmented reality. It's all sort of being looped now into what's called XR or mixed reality. There's haptic reality, there's interactive reality, there's all these kind of different subgenres. And there's so much opportunity for creativity and different ways of thinking. And it's really important that we try them all, try things out, and we need to fail, and we need to fix things, and we need to learn new things, and we need to get better at different things, because there's really no set playbook for this. There's not like, this is how you do it. That doesn't exist. It's for people to create. And so it's a very exciting time to be able to be a part of something like that. So when people ask me kind of, well, what do you think is the opportunity here? Like, I personally think it's an existential opportunity to say, what if I could tell you, how would you like to go back in a time machine and be a part of the invention of cinema? That's essentially where we're at right now. Like, you are on the ground floor of these inventions, and you are a part of its creation and what it will become. And the last thing I want to say is that I think it's of the utmost importance for people, all kinds of people, to participate in the creation of new technology. I'm not a tech person. I told you my background. I went to art school. I thought I wanted to be a filmmaker. I sort of meandered through my career and ended up in this space, working in this space. And at first I kind of thought to myself, I don't know, it's not something I ever, if someone asked me, do you want to work in VR? Like, I probably would have said no. Like, I don't know if I'm interested in that. And the more that I got involved in it, I thought, what a responsibility I have to be a different perspective, a different voice at this table to share what I think we should do. Because if you're passionate, these formats and these tools and these new experiences are going to become what the people who create them want them to become. And so that's why it's so important to have different people at the table. So we're at the point now where we're looking past even virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, all of these different things that I was just talking about. And we're heading towards AI. We're looking at blockchain, all these kind of new ways for us to explore society and civilization. And as we sort of run towards singularity, I think it's, again, of the utmost importance for regular people who are passionate about humanity, who are passionate about social justice, who are passionate about the arts and creativity, to be a part of this process. Because if we let corporations move the field of technology, then they will rush things to market to sell, to make money. And it's important that humanity is a core part of all technology's development. So I just leave you with, I'm so happy that you guys are all here today, and I'm really happy to answer any questions or talk about anything that you guys would like. I think we're at a moment in history where things can go a lot of different ways, and I hope that you guys are passionate about what you're doing and are going to be at the forefront of creating something extraordinary for the future. So thanks so much.
Asking, and so please come up and claim this microphone if you want to say something or ask Jessica a particular question. Anyone want to give us a try?
Come on, give it a try.
3D, and I hit it. Yeah. Okay. Anyone here who would like to mention something in particular that they think 3D would be useful for? Yes, thank you.
My name is Ashish Kumar, and I am a professor of communication at Hofstra. The issues of innovation are always at the heart of academic enterprise, but we are also challenged because we need to provide some stability so students can repeat what they're learning. And VR and all the new technologies that you have described are at such a nascent stage that the challenges of how to provide a mix of innovation as well as stability in the classroom. So my question is mainly from the point of view of an educator. I have students in my classroom, some of whom are from computer science, they've done a game design class. Many of them are television or journalism students, for whom the questions in their mind are mostly career driven, but also they're excited about the technology. So as an institution, we are often in this unenviable position of providing them the excitement of the new, but also the promise that they'll have something to sustain them as they move forward. So what would you offer to both to us as educators who are trying to get this balance in the classroom and to the students who are worrying about whether this will be sustaining for them in the future, and is this going to be there 5 years from now? Is it a fad?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. I talk to a lot of young people, and one of the things that I always try to stress is that every job I ever had literally did not exist when I was in high school or when I was in college. And there was, and I don't mean this as a pun, but there was virtually no way for me to prepare for them. And I would say that there is both no guarantee of anything, yet there is a very strong likelihood that virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality is a part of our future. I don't think we know how that's going to play out quite yet. I think we've already seen kind of a shift away towards VR and a shift towards AR. There was some development advances kind of in 2018 that really made augmented reality a lot more accessible and ubiquitous for mainstream audiences. I think a lot of times what I say to folks is like, people are skeptical, like, well, is this the new 3D TV? Which maybe nobody here even remembers what a 3D TV was, but that was supposed to be the next big thing. And so a lot of people liken this to that. And so I think that if Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Samsung, Nikon, if all of the major, biggest corporations in the world across technology and imagery have put major bets on this new technology, I'm pretty sure that they're going to make sure that it's successful. So I would say that there's a super high likelihood that it's a part of our future. I don't think we know what that looks like yet, and it's too soon to be able to say, well, if I do this, it will equate with that. That's also not how life works, or like how careers work. At least in my experience, that's not how my career has worked. Maybe other people have had that experience. I think in terms of practicing in a classroom, of creating this kind of content, I try to tell people just start. You have to just start. And you need to start with something that you can achieve. Because a lot of times people get overly ambitious and they're like, oh, I want to make some like amazing gaming interactive experience with this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, to be honest, it's just too hard to do when you're first starting out. So I would say start with something that you can accomplish. What's something you could do in a day? What's something that you could go, get in your car, go 10 minutes away and shoot? And then edit and look at it and learn something from it. And then move on to something that's more developed, something that's more like of a medium-sized complexity, add some new complexities to it. I think a lot of the initial wave of 360 video and virtual reality was around nature. I don't think there's an accident there that it's like a lot of the original pieces were like, why don't we go, kayaking through the Grand Canyon or go through the mountains in Alaska or, things like that, that just kind of take you to a different place, show something that's really beautiful and natural, lets you escape from the world that you're in. Those things are kind of like easy bets that are good practices. You have a high likelihood of coming out really successful, making something that you could learn from. So I would say to start there.
I have followed.
Professor in computer science, and you're right that if the big companies push, probably it will be successful, but then we are kind of pulling away, which I really liked your talk, that the humanity shouldn't basically leave everything to the big company to be developing. And it seems to me that beyond the entertainment and gaming, which there is always audience there, and the young people are always very fast to adopt new technology, unless there is some industry, some need that this thing would fulfill, that advancing a certain area wouldn't be successful, it really will give it a push. And I think probably one area would be to think of collaborative 3D environments, not just me solely having this experience walking to the mountains, but especially in engineering and technology. When you're collaborating, it's one thing just having one thing is just having a video conference. It's a completely different story. If you are able yourself to be in control of the viewpoint, if you're able to actually collaboratively interact in 3D, then it really becomes something really important, which cannot be done just over the phone and video conferences. So probably there's some work I know that was done with dancers. Basically, if you're doing remotely collaborative environment in 3D for dancers to experiment. So it seems that the interactivity will give it really a push.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. There are tons of startups that are working in that space. I mean, from kind of both examples that you gave, kind of, I don't know exactly what they call it. It's not like teleconferencing, but so that, but also you kind of more developed examples as well as the dance one you gave. But I would also say that there are tons of other industries that are using this outside of entertainment and gaming. So the healthcare industry, for example, less so with virtual reality, although I know that there are some pilot programs that have used virtual reality to teach med students about how to be empathetic. And I think there's also, there was another pilot program that was for terminally ill children using virtual reality, almost kind of like as a Make-A-Wish Foundation, where you could use virtual reality to take kids to a place that they would never be able to travel to while they were sick or recovering in their hospital beds. More so on the augmented reality side, there's incredible leaps and bounds of what has been done, specifically in the medical and healthcare space, of using holograms, remote surgery. There's stories of a guy, a hiker who fell through a crevasse, and emergency evacuation team came in a helicopter, and they were on a phone with a surgeon and used augmented reality to perform surgery in the helicopter and saved someone's life. A little more boring, but definitely the productivity side, augmented reality has been used to greatly increase productivity. I know companies like GE, obviously the military, folks like that are using augmented reality. So there are tons of different spaces outside of entertainment, gaming, arts and culture, media, things like that, that are using this technology in ways that will really change the world. I mean, some of those medical and healthcare examples would provide healthcare to people who would never have access to. And that really could, change the course of human history.
While we're talking, I just thought about it. One nice thing about this type of technology is that it's really kind of augments the human capabilities. And in a sense, people, when they get used to it, they're welcome. There's no scare factor. The way there is a scare factor as far as AI and robotics are concerned. People will be displaced from jobs. Machines are going to make decisions. They'll take over the world. Somehow this technology seems people are much easier to adopt, and I'm not scared. So, in my opinion, it's going to be
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, more so with augmented reality, I think that people do still have some fear with virtual reality just because it typically involves a headset. I can't tell you how many times we'd be doing demos and folks would put on a headset and they'd literally just look to the right and look to the left and then take it off and be like, okay, I'm good. And then you're like, no, look around, turn around, look down, look up. And then once they felt a little more comfortable, they were like, oh, wow, this is really amazing. This is so cool. But it took them a minute. There's something about when you shut off one of our senses and you put a headset on and it's black and you don't know what you're going to see. So you're like, is someone going to jump at me? Where am I going to be when the lights come up? There is some, I think, fear attributed to that. And I think some of the interactive pieces, there's a fairly well-known piece, I believe Facebook made for Game of Thrones, where you're standing on the edge of the wall and the army is coming towards you, and you feel like you're going to fall. Even though you're standing in a room and there's nothing there, but this depth perception that's in this experience really makes you feel like you're there, really makes you feel like you can't walk. And if you start to walk, you feel afraid you're gonna fall. And there's been a number of tests kind of around that kind of interactivity. So I think more so with virtual reality, there is still some fear, but less so with augmented reality, because as one person said to me once, which I thought was a great way to explain it, virtual reality takes you someplace else. It transports you someplace, where augmented reality brings something to you. And so, we're so used to using our smartphones and just, holding up your phone and seeing the real life with some augmented layer is a different kind of experience than, really kind of shutting yourself off in this headset and being transported either to a real place that's significantly different than where you are, or a fabricated